We are moving now to council time from the executive session that we just held. We had some discussion on removing the North 179th Street project and finance update to another part of the agenda in the future. What, Kathleen, do you recommend at this point? And by the way, I saw that the
give me just
executive sessions, item 7 had been canceled, so that's significant as well.
So I just heard that the presentation is probably 30 minutes, holding about 15 minutes for any Q&As and discussion with council. So if you would like to move that to another date, we can do it on August 8th. That is a day that we hold. I think that's the first or second day in August, and do it as a work session that day. It's up to council. But if we're going to make a change to the agenda, I'd recommend doing it before we start the meeting.
I would prefer to do it now. I feel like we bumped Ken once before, and I think let's take the time now.
I agree with that.
I will go muted. Chair, you're muted.
I saw Gary move his elbow, but I don't know what that means.
I did push my mute button. So I was going to say I'll go with the majority. The one downside is that Michelle's not here. And this would be, she's one of, 3 of our counselors are brand new to all these issues. So I would feel bad if she wasn't brought up to speed, and she's going to miss this.
She and I have already discussed how she will tune in and catch what she misses online. And so that's an important part, not to miss the content. Okay. So she's planning on doing that.
I'm fine to continue on then if you'd like to handle it today.
Well, let's do it. In that event, we have the 3. So we begin with council time at this point. And as you know, this is Wednesday, July 12, 2023. We start with public comment on agenda items only. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
Chair, we have one individual online. Caller, please go ahead and state your name and your comments.
This is Kimberly Goheen-Elbin, Vice Citizen of Clark County, Washington, USA. I'll be speaking to the June 28th minutes where Greg Kimsey and others and I spoke, and to relating to those words, in anything under my First Amendment rights may offend this council, yet I'll quote Mr. Medvedji that I believe were from these minutes, that he said, "We don't want to piss off the public." So please do not interrupt me as you usually do. And this is nothing personal, and especially to unelected Kathleen Otto, as she makes her proposals to this council, and this council follows. She's ruler over Clark County, USA, and I can say that she does not have to follow the One World Order agenda, as most counties in America do not follow the treasonous Biden's America Rescrew plan or the Build Back Bumbling Better agenda that is bankrupting America with our hard-earned tax dollars. And I'm just trying to wake up people here in Clark County that are at 3 years Zoom sleep to what is going on. And so a little bit to the Baker Tilly, it's an international business and complies to the socialist agenda, again, following the treasonous Joe Biden, by which he is there by a fraudulent voting system. And speaking of voting systems, Mr. Kimsey spoke, and also I'll say that it's such a fraudulent voting system, and trusting, I cannot trust the Clark County treasurer serving on behalf of the Clark County Auditor and Assessor. And that's exactly why I speak my First Amendment rights to warn and wake up Clark County citizens out of this 3-year pandemic. And I'm asking the citizens to discern for themselves as to how the local government here is closely following the city of Vancouver. And as mentioned earlier today, then Vancouver City Council is a 15-year member of the United Nations, ICLEI, and that United Nations entity has a twofold agenda: to depopulate with the China's man-made COVID in Wuhan lab, and for citizens to take a bioweapon for the depopulation plan. And the second agenda is to have a one world order, and they must take out America and her freedom and our liberties as following the New World Order. And it's disguised with all these great plans that Biden put out. And that's all I'm trying to do. And as far as the 179th Street, to me, it looks like, and I looked over the maps and stuff, and I also am a pilot. I haven't flown for a few years, but it's pretty much.
Time has concluded. Are there others who wish to speak?
No, Chair, we do
Yeah.
not have any others.
Okay, how about on old business? We have minutes for June 28. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
I would,
Madam Secretary.
I'll second.
A comment?
No, I was just going to second. I believe Councillor Medveji moved approval.
Okay, just getting in there, right? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those opposed? I believe it is yeah, let's do that again. I'm not sure. All those in favor of passing the minutes of June 28, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Thank you. The minutes are passed unanimously. Jail update. David Shook, we welcome you.
Good afternoon, Chair and councilors. Appreciate the opportunity to come and update you on some of the things we've been working on over the last couple of months. So I've been pretty consistent about having 43 operational openings in the jail, but we do have some good news. 27 of those vacancies hopefully will be getting filled in the next several weeks. We have 7 new hires already in field training, so they're learning the job of corrections officers. We have 4 more in post-testing hiring, so they're getting those last few steps done before they start the job. While it's not luck for some, Larch Mountain Correctional Facility is really kind of closing down their shop a bit, and so we had very quickly 20 plus employees that asked to come talk to us about coming to work here. So we had 25 interviews, or 25 employees who showed up to an open house a couple weeks ago, and of that we interviewed 15 of them last week. I believe 14 of them are going to be offered jobs, and they'll be going through some additional hiring testing. So instantly we get some folks that have experience in correctional work. Again, that's not an instant add to our efforts, but it definitely allows for some unintended improvements right away. So those things we're really grateful for. We also have 10 additional entry hires that are in the process, and I believe they're being interviewed next week. So if things go well with that group, we should have a good number, and pretty soon we're up near that 27. So as we continue to hire these folks and get them trained up, we're really excited about what it looks like to be fully staffed again, which hasn't happened in such a long time. One of the things that we're doing right now is working with our law and justice partners. I know Councilor Marshall and Medveji have received emails from different organizations or cities asking about the processes, and those are the things that we're working on, is how we can efficiently bring inmates, all inmates or arrestees, to our facility and have them processed effectively, keep those that we need to, get the others where they need to be through the court processes. One of the things that I do like to remind folks is this main facility is currently the only correctional institution we have here in Clark County at a county level. Our jail work center is closed currently. Our H-Pod, which you've heard of before, which holds about 53 beds, is currently closed because of staffing. So those are some things that would be able to be improved once we get more staffing online. So we currently have 425 inmates in a facility with this 491. One of the things we're currently doing is some security updates to our excuse me, our max areas. And so what that does is it eliminates 28 beds. So you take that 28 beds out of that bigger number. Actually, best practices in corrections work requires you to keep about 20% of your beds empty so that you can move different inmates around depending on what's going on with them. So that number really takes us down to about 365. And as I said, we have 425 today. So we're working with the prosecutor's office and the courts to try to figure out how to effectively keep those right numbers. COVID really stopped a lot of the lower level criminal activity, arrests and processes from happening in only the higher level, and now they're ready to start opening those up. So as we need to process different inmates, it'll be really important to make sure our system, and in fact our booking policy is from the 1990s. So those are some of the things that we're looking at trying to update for 2023 in our current law and justice system. So as we look at that population and trying to improve, one of the things that's happened here in just the last few months is we've been able to open up some of our reentry programs. So some of the different programs that we haven't been able to do because of staffing and other personnel not having the right positions, and we're able to start getting the arrestees dealing with child support, college, other job employment kinds of programs that we've not just historically over the last couple of years been able to accomplish. As we continue to create or reopen some of those relationships with our external partners, I see nothing but successful relationships and making sure that we're helping with the recidivism of those inmates that come to us. One of the things that's happened over the last year also is when I first started keeping track of our inmate numbers, it was up at 476, and it went all the way down to 376. And so again, we have a lot of fluctuation there. And as we move through that, we're going to make sure that that process is more effective. So anyways, super proud of the staff there. They are working extremely hard. We're still mandatorying a lot of employees working 16 hours many times a week, and so they're tired and they're looking for this relief from some of these new folks that we're bringing in. So we're super excited about that.
Are you ready for questions?
Question? Yes, ma'am.
David, I think all of us have been reading about Larch on the in the media. And you've touched on it as far as its impact on our facilities. Would you expand on that a little bit? What really would be the impact if they do shut down?
Well, one of the first conversations I had with some of the DOC folks was the changing in some of the possession of drugs charges. The fix that they just did for possession and making it a misdemeanor. Well, a lot of those inmates that were arrested for possession of drugs are no longer going to be at the state level, they're going to be at the local level. So it's going to be very impactful for the local county jails and other institutions that are having to now manage those kinds of inmates that are being arrested. My understanding is that while there are lots of great programs for these, Larch Mountain, I understand, is a work release, or not a release center, but an end of your sentence kind of a place. So you're going through programs, you're a part of different educational and other job training, like the fire department for DNR. Those are some of the things that will be closed down with Larch going away. For us, though, the employees, the inmates will be moved elsewhere. My understanding is they were about half staff and half inmates, so they're only partially working that entire prison. So those were some of the initial impacts that were happening.
Very interesting, because that is not what we read about in the news, but very real with what you are dealing with.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, I've got one quick question.
Shirley, go ahead.
So I was curious, and it's great news, by the way, that we're coming back up to staff. I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a very good thing for our community, but I'm curious, as we talk about HPOD and the work center, as we build our staff back up and we look at reopening some of these, systems that we had previously, what kind of a process are you going through to kind of reevaluate how we've always done it, whether we should change it, whether it's a good program, that type of situation, or how are you going through that evaluation process before we look at rolling out again?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's such a great question, because each of those different areas affect different stakeholders. So the prosecutor's office, for example, they use the work release, and one of the areas that has been affected mostly by not having inmates at a lower level of crime is that our industries area where they cook food and do laundry, we're now having to staff them with temporary employees. And so that percentage actually just went up about 17%, I believe. And so as we're trying to figure out how to staff and how to also man those kinds of areas, because those are requirements, no matter who's doing it, we're going to have to feed food and we're going to have to do laundry and all those other things. So what we're doing in that law and justice conversation is we're reaching out to each of those entities and figuring out how those are going to more effectively work in the future system. Those are still conversations, are still in process. And so, again, we're not looking to just reopen 1990. We're looking at the future of what's going on. And so having Anna Lookenbill and some of our other reentry folks that are prioritizing those stakeholder relationships, trying to figure out the alternative programs that parole and probation can use and the courts can use with whether it's ankle monitoring or whatever. Those are all discussions that we're starting to have and to try to figure out what it goes, because in the same sense, we're also looking at remodeling and building a new facility or areas of a new facility, which would add 350 new beds. So again, as we grow as an organization and institution, and what does that functionality look like? We can't go back and look at the past. We've got to look at the future and what does this corrections institution look like for our community going forward. So those discussions are happening. I know we're putting together stakeholder groups to have those conversations with the architects as well as just our community partners.
Great, thank you very much, and I appreciate that, and I know that the community is really antsy to, get these services going again, but I think it's really critical that we take a real sharp eye and look at these programs and build it into the conversation of new facilities and stuff so that we roll out things in a really good, sustainable, organized way so we can have the most effective system possible. So I appreciate that update.
Yeah, some of the state rules and the laws are changing, right? So with DSHS and others, and so making sure that we have the right stakeholders together to see what that program look like will be critical.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned Larch Mountain. I hadn't thought of it in terms of the benefit it could be for the jail and the county. And I must say I have really mixed feelings about that, because I think it's really a very good institution that's been doing some really great work and with the inmates there and in relation to the fire prevention work. But what would the timing be in terms of when you think you may get up to full staff and then the ability to open up those other facilities, and how that may alleviate some of the pressure on the jail?
My understanding, with the normal hiring process is anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks just to get people on board, and then the ones that are already certified or qualified, it's getting them through field training, which is somewhere between a month and 3, depending on those individuals. One thing that Deputy Director Pelikowski reminds me is Department of Corrections work is much different than local jail work, and so making sure they understand our facility work will be critical, but they should be able to take on some of that right away. So I am hoping in that 2 to 4 month period, depending on their skills and abilities, those DOC employees would be able to affect some of that. Our first priority is going to be HPOD because it's attached to the main jail facility. Again, that's 53 instant beds. The thing about the work center, while it will require more employees, it's more logistically involved because the inmates that you have there that are either working in industries, right, that's a work center, but the ones that are going out to work in the community, we have to have a different layering of support. So we'll have employees that are going out and checking up on those inmates that are in those programs and different things. And so that actually adds to our numbers of employees having to do that. And so again, as we want to make sure we open those things smartly and make sure that we're doing it as efficiently as we can. As you know, one of our other stakeholders took over the other work center area, right? So we have one of those facilities that are currently available for us. So it's about 100 beds. So we're going to have to look at how we're going to currently use that facility and what makes sense for the new Clark County jail system. So.
Thank you, and good work on all fronts.
Oh, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Counselor?
So we've had some comments about Larch Mountain, and I was going to make some comments and make a request of the council during counselor reports, but it's come up with both the chair and Sue as well. And I didn't want to have David sit through the new business as he may have some comments or not. But anyway, so can I make my comments now or should I wait until counselor report?
Please go ahead now.
All right, so number one, you know, that it's a state facility, it's not ours, but we weren't consulted and it kind of hit us like a lead balloon without much advance notice. So we had no say in the process of drawing it down. And so I don't know if we want to have a resolution or of some kind stating our opposition to its closure. Related to that, there was a false narrative coming out of state prisons that this was good news because their population was down and didn't justify it being open. Well, crime is up. And as David mentioned, you know, the reason why it's been depopulated is because the decriminalization of certain felony crimes. So crime hasn't gone down. The other issue that Sue just mentioned, you know, I was there and talked to the firefighters from Larch last year when they were at Grove Field going out and being deployed. They are a local precious resource. And if anything, that training and that population should be enlarged. They could make it a fire-based wildfire training facility because it's good for restorative justice, it's good for rehabilitation, and it's great for the community to have that asset so close by to fight fires. The other part of this is, you know, we are struggling statewide for secure facilities for restorative services. We don't have the mental health services, and it is a violation of human rights from my point of view to keep defendants who are not restored, not receiving treatment, incarcerated without treatment. A facility like Larch could be converted. Obviously, the tough part is getting the staff to do the forensic work that would normally happen in a mental facility. But these people are already incarcerated and they are just in limbo. And I don't know if the public realizes it. They're not able to participate in the defense of their case. So their case just is in limbo until they receive the forensic services. It's a travesty. And Larch Mountain could be a facility with the appropriate staff and conversion to do restorative services. So anyway, my request during council reports was going to be, do we want to speak up? We know it's a state facility. They're not offering it to us, but we've had a lot of constituents reach out on this topic.
Do any counselors wish to respond to the question raised?
Yes, I'd be very supportive. Actually, it was an issue I was going to bring up as well. I'd like to go out really and learn more about the facility and take a tour, but I would support really looking into this. And I think that it serves that firefighting resource locally, which we know is only going to be more challenging going forward. But, they've been so successful in terms of recidivism and really training people that, I think having a good worthwhile job is really the most beneficial thing that will keep people on the right path. So I'd support a resolution taking some action or exploring collaboration.
I've heard several things from you, Sue, one of them being to visit and find out more about what exists there. And another would be to take a position based on that. We don't have that benefit of having seen what you would see at this point in time. My personal position would be, let's look at taking a resolution in hand when we have our feet on the ground with what the process is going to be for involving the county. We may have some real opportunities there that would be appropriate, I think, for us to address in a resolution. But right now, I don't think we know what they are. So my suggestion would be to wait at least a week or two to get a little more information.
That sounds good. I'm not sure that the county was considered as part of the process. So if we want to be part of the process, I think we'll need to insert ourselves.
Yeah, well, they know now because we've had the discussions with them now, and they know what kind of roles that we might see ourselves involved with. So, but where those discussions might go, who knows?
Chair, if I may, real quick.
Yes, of course.
I was just curious if Councilor Medved might be able to give just a little bit more. I mean, is this just a resolution to notify them that we're interested and that we don't want them to vacate the building? We're looking at potentially repurposing it, or what exactly is the intention for any kind of a suggested resolution?
So I was first going to say, Karen, I don't know that we're going to hear from them at all. So I don't know what we're waiting on. My request was basically to speak up and say, we object. We would have wanted to be part of the process, and we'd like to see the facility remain open. If nothing else, because of its firefighting capability as a local asset. It's just our ability collectively to take a position that, one, we would have considered ourselves a stakeholder, and two, we object to their precipitously closing it. That's essentially, if it would take other entities to convert it, to repurpose it. I mean, for restorative services, that takes a lot of mental health capacity that isn't readily available, and that takes a whole different state department to get involved. So, I'm just throwing that out there that it should be viewed for different purposes instead of just closing it. We had constituents reach out, hey, what happens to the roads? Are they going to be plowed anymore? People live out that way. And the simple answer from Public Works was, boy, we hadn't thought of that. We don't know. So a resolution could simply say, hey, we're a stakeholder, we object, if we're willing to speak our minds.
Well, Gary, if you wish, why don't you go ahead and have something to that effect drafted up? We'll take a look at it and maybe send it forward next week.
Just after hearing that response, so I would definitely be supportive of something of that nature, coming in and saying, hey, we don't support you closing it without involving the community in a process of evaluating what's going to happen. So yeah, I'd be interested in looking at that.
I would support that as well.
I'm not sure what we mean by involving the community, but I think I would support involving the county because the county has a number of offices that are integrally affected by large. Are there 3 votes for going ahead with that? I see 2. There's 3. Okay, we'll look at that next week, and thank you, Gary, for bringing that up. Is there anything else? We were on the jail update, were we not?
Chair, can I just add something real quick? I just want to say that the team did this in 6 months to get to this pipeline built up for staff. So I'm just incredibly proud of all the work that recruitment team has done and going out to all the different locations, JBLM, the different open houses. Even without Larch, we were on track to have outstanding recruitment numbers that they have produced, and they did it in 6 months, and I couldn't be prouder of the team. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Wonderful.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, David, for your report. And let's move to new business, Northeast 179th Street project.
Chair?
Staff. Yes.
Could I get like about a 2 to 3 minute break? I had to run here for my last meeting and never had a chance to
Not a
take care of
problem.
it.
Let's make it 4
Thank you.
minutes.
I'll be right back.
It's 2:55. We'll see you at 2:59. It is Wednesday, July 12, 2023. We are midway in the council time agenda, ready to begin with new business, Northeast 179th Street project, and we turn to you, staff, for the updates.
Good afternoon, Chair Bowerman. Thank you, Council. We're happy to be here this afternoon. I especially want to thank you for allowing us to proceed with the presentation. We've put a lot of time and effort into the work, and staff is appreciative, and I'm hoping to be on vacation August 8th, so this works out better for me. So. My name's Ken Lader. I'm the Public Works Director, and more specifically, I'm here in my role as the county engineer. Something you might not know is that most county commissions, when they started, were started as road commissions back in the early days, and so I would have been the county road engineer, and you would be our road commissioners, and so we're happy to be here in that capacity. Of course, in a more urbanized area, you have many more duties that you're dealing with day in, day out, and the roads are just a part of it, but an important part. So our main goal for today's presentation is to provide you with an update on the 179th Street corridor projects, and this will include our latest financial update. I'll also include summary information about our developer agreements that are associated with the 2020 urban holding lift. And my hope is that we can make this engaging and efficient. With me today are several key staff in person and online that will be here to assist in answering questions you might have as we get to the end of the presentation. Specifically, up front with me today are Scott Sawyer and Sherry Villafane. Scott has been instrumental in organizing our project engineering information for this presentation. And likewise, Sherry Villafane and her team have worked tirelessly to create our latest financial forecast, which has really been an invaluable tool for us to compare apples to apples, the historical and current cost estimates. I do want to take a minute also just in light of Baker Tilly and a lot of our staffing. Tomorrow will mark 1 year for me as the county engineer. I was acting county engineer on the 13th of July a year ago. We have done so much work in that year just around, we've lost a lot of institutional knowledge in some of those employees that are gone. But what we have preserved is a lot of staff who've stepped up, who've really gone above and beyond. Some of them have become new managers in our group, and they bring a lot of knowledge and excitement. And I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. So just want to take a minute to acknowledge them and report that to you as well. So I recognize that you've had a very full day today. And you've been presented a lot of information. This is a pretty big presentation, but I am going to try to streamline a little bit of it. I don't want it to go by like a freight train. So at the end, I'm happy to go back through any slides. And then if there's additional time that we need with any of you, or especially Councilor Belcott, we can work with the county manager to make sure that all of your questions are covered. So today we're going to cover a brief background, update our cost estimates. We'll look at some things that are critical in impacting our schedules, almost. And then we're going to update those schedules. We'll look at project overviews, specific project information. We'll talk briefly about our outreach efforts. And then we'll look at 2 forecasts, one for our projects in the corridor, and then the county road fund itself as a whole. And we'll also do a brief update on the activity for the developer agreements that were associated with the urban holding lift. So that's a lot, and thank you. I do want to mention also that next week, I hope, there will be a public hearing on the access management and circulation plan for 179th. That's on July 18th in the evening. What we're discussing today really won't relate to that, except that the projects are in the same corridor, obviously. So, all right. So, as a brief historical reminder, prior to the end of 2019, there was an urban holding overlay in place along the corridor for 179th. Council's decision to lift the urban holding included a strategy to provide reasonable funding for capital projects in the area. The projects were designated as Step 1 or 2, and what you see on this map are the Step 1 projects in green. They amounted to a cost estimate of $66.5 million. We'll discuss the estimates here more in a few minutes. Next slide, please. This map shows, in addition, the Step 2 projects in blue. They'll be discussed, 2 of these projects will be discussed in our presentation today, the ones on the east side of the interchange. And the projects to the west side of the interstate are not programmed in our current 6-year program. So we won't really be talking about those today, but we do continue to work with planning and programming to discuss when those will come onto our schedule. They're just not really in our short-term program yet. The urban growth area here is shown as the gold and black dashed line. Prior urban holding it was lifted, and it's that hatched area that you can see that kind of surrounds the corridor. This allowed development to proceed in the area. Next slide, please. So we're actually going to visit this slide a couple of times during the presentation. The typical project phases and milestones here. First, the PS&E, that note stands for plans, specifications, and estimates. But this graphic, it displays the range of uncertainty during the life cycle of our projects. All projects, when they're in the beginning planning stage, begin with scopes that are very generalized, and have little detail, and they have assumptions that are broad, and that's kind of over there on the left in the project initiation. As preliminary engineering progresses, more details are understood, and our estimates for schedule and cost become more certain. You'll see kind of a wide oval area there and more red as we reach our final plan specs and estimates. That's not quite intuitive, but once we go into the competitive bidding session and we're looking for pricing from contractors, we actually have more uncertainty during that time. So things that have changed in the market after we finalized our estimates, or as construction breaks ground and we award a contract, we might find unknowns that weren't really known to a project. That can cause uncertainty with the pricing compared to our estimates. And then, of course, as we go through construction and get closer to completing a project, we know the true costs of the project as it closes out. Next slide, please. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. This is kind of the big number slide for our presentation today. It shows a comparison of the original project cost estimates in 2019 against our most recent estimates that were just put together. We've also separated the utility reimbursable work in its own column. This usually gets added to our projects around the 90% design level. When we understand which utilities might partner with us in contract, those are not costs that are to the county, but are reimbursed to us by utilities. So if Northwest Natural, for instance, might have us do some work, more likely Clark Regional would have us build a sewer line, and then they would reimburse us for those costs of the contract work. We have listed in the top of this chart is our step one projects, those ones that were in green on the previous map. We've also listed a single step two project, and I'll explain why that's on this chart in a minute. But I do want to just note a few things. So compared to the 2019 estimate of $66.5 million that reasonably funded the projects for the lifting of urban holding, our current cost estimate is approximately $83.1 million. So note that the 2019 estimate was based primarily on 0% design, so that's a planning level scope. Exceptions, though, include the 10th Avenue project at the top, which was actually 90% complete in design at the time. The construction on that project is now complete. And then we had also done quite a bit of alternative analysis for the areas around Del Fel and the interchange and 15th Avenue to look at different things that we might be able to do for how to affect those alignments. So those were further along, but everything else really was just a planning level estimate at the time. So that's that red line uncertainty area to the left of the heat map that we saw previously. So the project that's initially described as 179th with the I-5, it's the second line down up there rather than read it. It's actually now been split into two projects for logical termini. The one is the Del Fel realignment project, which we'll see more of. And then a small gap between the WashDOT right-of-way and our 15th Avenue project. That's that $3.5 million. And we, like I said, we will come back to this slide. A couple of other things that I do want to point out, though. So the estimate reflects an approximate increase of 25% compared to the 2019 numbers. A few major factors really are that those initial numbers, again, were our scoping level estimates. But one good example of a dramatic increase is the 29th Avenue project. You'll see the $8 million estimate versus $22 million. The original estimate was to place a signalized intersection and have a pretty small grade change. And if you've ever gone through that intersection, you'll know it's the one that's very steep and kind of canters over, and if it's frozen, people just don't stop and they slide through, and it's pretty bad. Our design now is at 90%. We have a multi-lane roundabout that's being designed there. It raises the intersection significantly to flatten the grade, creates a very safe situation. It also has two stream crossings for Milk Creek, for a tributary, that are both fish passage. They're short bridge spans. This is a very good example where we can do a better job on our scoping level estimates to try not to work just in 2 dimensions, but to really look at what's going on with 3D topography and some of the future environmental impacts that we need to mitigate for. Another thing on this table that you can see is that there's a dramatic decrease for the intersection work at 50th. And this is actually because we rescoped the project to an interim project where we're actually just widening the turn lanes, and we've modeled that this meets our traffic needs until 2035. So this made a lot of sense as far as the staging and construction for all the projects. The last thing I wanted to mention on here is the 15th Avenue project. You'll see that there's quite a bit of increase, about 15 million to 24.7. This really shows an example of a project that's likely scoped pretty well at the planning level, but the estimate has shown increases due to cost inflation, as well as some difficult utility crossings that we have with the Williams high-pressure gas line. So we'll cover those projects more and look at the road fund as well. So next slide, please. I was going to spend more time on the next 3 slides, but I'm going to try to accelerate that just to keep us on schedule, because I know this can be wordy stuff. But the things to pay attention to here are that for our NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, this has to do with permitting our projects. We have to have independent utility on our projects, which really means that to build a project, it has to be, its stormwater needs need to be met without, it needs to be built at the time of the project. I'm going to show that on a map. And so we got a little bit sideways because of our stormwater on 3 of our projects, and I'll show you why. So next slide, please. So, and I say we got sideways because, and I was instrumental in this, we decided we had a better solution than building 4 stormwater ponds, and that was to use the land that we already had available. That's the blue pond that's shown there. And it's in an area that's large enough that we can service the stormwater needs for 4 of the projects at a single site. So this works really well as far as cost effectiveness on the projects, but unfortunately it ties all these projects together as far as independent utility, because that stormwater pond needs to be built before the projects can be constructed. And then the other problem with that is you'll see that we've got the 2 projects, the one on the left there, Del Fel, the extension of 15th, and then this kind of grayer area that's left and right of 15th. Those are step 2 projects. The step 2 project between 15th and 29th, or up to 26th, wasn't planned to be built as part of our first series of projects. So we've accelerated the design on it, but it actually needs to be built with that pond so that we can do Del Fel and 15th Avenue. Happy to talk more about that as well. So next slide, please. Another thing that's affecting our schedules is that the Endangered Species Act, as far as our biological assessments, so new data has shown a connection between tire particulates, so the rubber off of our cars, the 6-ppd quinone causes early death in juvenile salmon. This has caused new rules from the National Marine Fisheries Service, otherwise known as NMFS. And basically, NMFS is now requiring all projects that create drivable surfaces to submit biological assessments, we were going to do that anyway for these projects, but you can imagine now they have all this increased caseload for their permitting, and we are right in line with everybody else. So the time for review has increased from 1 year to 2 years, and that essentially has added a year to our project schedules across the board. So next slide, please. Yeah, so that's a big pill to swallow. So this will be your first look at our update to the schedules for the corridor projects, and I'm going to just start at the top and go right on down. So 10th Avenue, that's the segment that's south of the new bridge on 10th Avenue from 149th to 154th. That project is complete. It was primarily completed last year with a little bit of work still going on this year. But you can drive right up the 10th Avenue corridor as long as you don't get stuck trying to navigate the new roundabout that development's putting in down closer to the interchange. So, so that one's done. That was part of the $66.5 million estimate. The second project is our intersection at 50th. So this is all the way on the east side of our project corridor. We are on schedule to do those improvements starting next summer in 2024. That will improve the intersection up there by the Holt Homes work, and it should be done in one construction season. And then on line 3, our 29th Avenue intersection, that schedule has been affected by the biological assessment review timeline, and we are now estimating that we'll start construction in 2025. That is a 2-year schedule and will involve a pretty long road closure. We're not sure how long yet, but I would say the better part of a year at least. So, and that starts in 2025. And then the remainder of the projects, which are 15th, Del Fel, and then that step 2 project that we listed with all the others on our cost estimates, that's that section that has the pond between 15th and 26th Avenue. Our best estimate right now is that those will begin construction or be permitted to begin construction in 2028. Now, what we haven't figured out is how to do 3 large projects like that all at once, because it's a construction problem to get traffic through the area. 2 of those projects, 15th and Del Fel, are right in close to the interchange and will also be competing with the WashDOT work at the interchange itself. So we can come back to that. So, all right, next slide. So this is an example of the impact to the schedules. I don't have all the schedules here, but thank you to a few of our staff who worked on this. Audrey, especially, appreciate it. We, for the intersection at 29th Avenue, I mentioned we had scheduled to start that next year. We're now anticipating that that will happen in 2025. And if you look at the preliminary engineering schedule, it doesn't change. We're really going to be done with the design, but we'll be waiting on that extra year for the BA review and permitting, at which point we will adjust the plans accordingly, take it to final for bidding to go to construction in the summer of 2025. And then next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit different. We've made an attempt to combine the schedule impacts for the 3 projects that are tied together with a single stormwater pond. Now this shows the very last schedule, which is that step 2 project between 15th and 26th. Because it's the one that we started late and are now playing catch up on. But essentially, it shows that by the time we get through our engineering, and again, that additional time for the biological assessment and permitting, that we anticipate construction starting in 2028. And that particular project, I'm not sure that one is a 2-year project, is it, Scott?
I believe we can do most of it first year.
Okay.
And then have traffic open for the following.
Yeah, so we think we can at least get the pond and most of the work done for that project between 15th and 26th, which should help us then in phasing the 15th Avenue project as well as Del Fel. So lots of moving parts, but that's essentially the schedule effect and impact. So next slide, please. And I've just jumped off my notes entirely, which is probably just fine. So I did want to go back to this slide again, just to take a brief peek and remind that as we go through these estimates and the preliminary engineering, we do get more and more certain, especially around the 90% design level. That's actually when we initiate most of our negotiations and appraisals and discussions with property owners that might be impacted along our projects. So once we have the design to that level, we're pretty sure where we're going to be constructing and what the effects will be to property owners. But then from that 90% level, it takes us about a year to get those files in place and negotiate with the homeowners. So long construction schedules. I will say it's a real, just kudos to the staff that when I first saw these corridor projects back when it was talked about as a package, and my predecessors were discussing completing these in 6 years. I don't know of anyone who had done projects like these that thought that was possible. The fact that we can be sitting here today talking about getting a very large portions of them started in 2028 is pretty significant, and I think a real hats off to the effort that's being done. So next slide, please. So just an overview of, I probably should have started with this slide, but an overview of what the projects look like next to the interstate. Left to right, that's the Del Fel realignment, the WashDOT interchange project, the extension of 15th Avenue to the north that ties it into 10th, the segment that we've been talking about that has the pond that's so critical between 15th and 29th. And then what's not shown on, and then the intersection at 29th Avenue, what's not shown on this slide but is on the next, you can go ahead, thank you. And way over there to the east is the intersection at 50th. Now on this slide, that shows a roundabout. We have delayed that, and we're doing an interim project there, and I can show you some details on that. So I did want to pause on this slide and just take a look at the corridor. You know, you can see the roller coaster-like effect if you're familiar with 179th. If you know how it is out there. If you're not, I recommend you take a drive. It's one of those up and down situations that really takes quite a bit of grade change to make it a safe corridor for traveling with these road improvements that we're talking about. So our plan is to design the corridor at a 40-mile-an-hour design speed, which would be a posted speed of 35 miles per hour. Yeah, it's a principal collector. It's a big road. So, but you can see some of those dips where the culverts are, where we have to build walls and or bridges and large fish passage structures. So, next slide, please. So I just want to check. I promised you guys 30 minutes, and I'm 25 minutes in, and I've got a long ways to go. So these slides are kind of my throwaways, but they're the detail for each project. But I would ask you to take a look. They just show more details for each project. If you have questions, get back to me. We do break it down into preliminary engineering, right-of-way, construction, and then the totals. These would match up with the table that we started with on slide 5, I believe, and also discusses the construction timeframes. Next slide, please. And we just kind of step through each one. I do want to take a second on this one, if you could scroll down a little bit more. So WashDOT did get their budget approved. It actually was increased. There's a 900-foot culvert that goes kind of from Del Fell and heads east under the freeway right now, and then discharges into that tributary to Whipple Creek. That is going to be replaced by above ground open channel flow and opens up a lot of fish habitat up there in the north of where we're realigning Del Fell. So this is a good project for the environment. WashDOT did get their budget to do that. One of the problems we had with stormwater on the Del Fell project is it was hard to site a stormwater pond near that intersection without disrupting the habitat that the state was trying to open back up, so, which again led us to the other pond. So next slide, please. This is just that short gap between the WashDOT right-of-way and our project, 15th. Next slide, please. And 15th Avenue extension, again, more detail shown on there. One feature, you'll see a couple of roundabouts that are grayed out. Those are developer roundabouts that they're responsible for building. Whether or not they come in with us on construction as partners and pay for those to be built with our contractor is still to be determined, but we will be building the core corridor with or without those improvements. And this is the segment from 15th to 26th that ties in with that intersection project at 29th. It doesn't show the roundabouts on here, but those would be done. The one at 29th would be completed by the time this work would start. And then this would build the pond for those 3 or 4 projects that we were talking about. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is the large intersection project at 29th. This will be originally configured as a single lane roundabout, and you can see the 2 bridge crossings on there for the Mill Creek tributary and the stormwater pond that's associated with this intersection. The way that works is we start with a single lane roundabout. Once traffic demands increase, we actually have built the outside envelope so that it can hold the full traffic and multi-lanes. And we basically lift up those aprons, peel them off, and restripe the road. I'm making it sound pretty simple. It is pretty straightforward and highly cost effective. We basically have built the intersection out to its ultimate space and then can reconfigure it so that we can drive on multiple lanes when it's needed, but not right away. So next slide, please. Okay, and then this is the lane reconfiguration at 50th Avenue. And again, the map on the right is the ultimate build, which we're not doing. It's not scheduled right now, so. I didn't want to blow by this, but I see that my time estimating is a little bit off, so my apologies. But I'm going to just quickly say we have had a ton of outreach related to these projects for both the access management and circulation plan, but also for the capital projects, open houses, articles in the newspaper. We just completed 4 listening sessions with the community. We did 3 in person a couple weeks ago, and the last one last week online, which I'd rather do them in person every day if I could. But you know, to the effect of, I think over the course of 10 mailings, we've sent out over 87,000 mailers to the community. So it's quite a bit of outreach. We're happy to dig into the details of any of that if there's interest or any questions about specifics. All right, so the important stuff. So does this work? We've shown you increased costs, and what does that mean for the forecast of the corridor? Are we still reasonably funded, and can we make this work? And I don't know if you can move I don't know if we have one more. Actually, let me get this slide up here. It's all good. Okay. So I'm going to go to my notes here real quick. This is our project forecast update. The slide provides a forecast of the project revenue and the expenditures for the step 1 and step 2 projects that we've been talking about today. Again, just the 2 step 2 projects that are on the east side of the interchange. We discussed the project from 15th to 26th that has the stormwater pond. The forecast displays the current and best estimates of the project costs for the step 1 projects and a total of approximately $86.3 million. This ties to the original chart that we showed. That's the $83.1 million in county project costs and the $3.1 million in utility reimbursements with a slight rounding adjustment. So we got about $67,000 in there that would make up that, to round it up to 86.3. So that ties back to the original chart. Happy to answer questions on it. Shown in the right-hand column are the 2019 estimates. You'll note again that some of the project extents where those numbers were calculated have been shifted, but that's just really the project naming and extents as we started those into the design. So we do believe this is an apples to apples comparison of our best look at the revenue and expenditures for the projects as it's forecasted over the next 6 years. I think the only other thing I want to mention on this slide is just, it's a good example of how we leverage money against the county road fund. You'll see the county road fund line on there, but also take note of our REAP 2, TIF, and grants that significant inputs to the projects often aren't just the county road fund. So next slide, please. So this is our road fund forecast update. So this has been very recently updated and reflects everything that we've talked about today for the project costs and projects it with all of our other projects that are programmed currently in the Transportation Improvement Program for 2023 through 2028. We show that the projects are still reasonably funded, that the fund has good health. We do have to build the fund up through time, as you see, in order to implement some of the larger projects around the 2028 time period. But this all looks healthy. This does include our new, adopted by council, the reserve balance policy. I know it says policy pending on there. I apologize. So you did adopt that. So that's reflected in here, as well as up in general expenses. We have included the Baker Tilly implementation in case that's approved, just to see what effect it would have year over year. So that is in this forecast as well. So this is a real-time snapshot of where we think we're at. It's the best shot we've gotten. Again, kudos to Sherry and Mandy and the work that they've done on this. It's phenomenal. So I've got one more slide. And thank you again for letting us go ahead today. So, and I know I'm freight training at Chair Bowerman, so my apologies. So this slide shows a brief update on the developer agreement activity and status. So these are the 4 developer agreements that were made in place as part of the urban holding lift: Mill Creek, M&H subdivision, North Haven, and Three Creeks. You'll see that there are several single-family residential lots that have been approved already. And the elementary school for Ridgefield on the Three Creeks parcel north of 179th. We've also listed, and real thanks to Diana Nutt and working with David Jardine on these, but the phases that have been platted, how many lots. North Haven, for instance, all the way on the west side of the corridor, has all phases platted at this point. And then building permits issued, you can see just 37, but construction is underway. The M&H subdivision over on the other side, on the east end by 174th, site construction is underway, and then just a little bit more detail on there. So I'm going to catch a breath and open it up for questions. So 35 minutes, 37 minutes, so.
Good job.
Sorry.
No, good job. Questions from council?
So if I may, first of all, Ken, you didn't need to apologize. I can't imagine the huge amount of work that you put into this to rationalize and fix some gaps in the planning that had occurred over the last couple of years. So thank you so much for all this work and the presentation you did. I'm surprised to see that there aren't additional development agreements, because there were a couple beyond the four that were expressing interest and trying to get on board. So there were no other development agreements that were created after the initial four?
To my understanding, there aren't additional developer agreements, but we do have several other developments that are occurring and are in different stages of application in the corridor. And I'm going to look to David. Is that? Yeah, so I got confirmation that's correct. So no other DAs, but there is quite a bit of other work. In fact, Diana put together a table for me, and I believe there are 8 more developments that are already in some stage of application process, but I don't think there are any building permits issued for any of those at this point, or if they're not completed already, sorry, yeah.
Okay, super. Thank you. This is a great update. I really don't have additional questions. Thank you so much to you and your team.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. I recognize I may have more questions than people want to hear, and so perhaps we could just set up a meeting and I could thoroughly get into this, the details of this. But I do want to thank you, Ken, and your staff for stepping up into the roles that you're serving now and for all the work that you've put into this. And I want to thank my fellow counselors, Counselor Bowerman and Medvigi, for taking a step back and really allowing additional community involvement in this, for which there has been extensive community involvement. So thank you for that. I was only able to go to one of the listening sessions, but the one I attended was well attended by the community. They were very engaged, and I think you provided them with great information, and including just being frank with them about what can change and what can't change. I think I just encourage you to stay engaged with the community, because this is going to play out over a long period of time. It's a big and very complex project, and I know there remain concerns about some of the connector roads and how it's going to impact individual properties and what that means for their property. So I would just encourage that. And then just related to the cost of things, and I do feel like the decision to lift the urban holding was rushed, and not all of the information was adequately vetted at the time. So, well, okay, that's what we're living with that now. But was Step 2 really included the cost of Step 2 in the calculations in terms of meeting concurrency? Because that's something that still lingers with me, and not understanding how that really all of the costs were fully considered. And again, that's another decision that's been made, and we're living with it now.
Yeah, so I didn't include the Step 2 projects and the total extent of, I think it was $105 million at the time, but my understanding is those were included for concurrency at the time. We are still working with planning and programming to make sure that those projects proceed. They're just not part of our, 6-year plan. And I'm not sure I'm answering. I can tell I didn't quite hit the note. Yeah.
Well, it's just one of those things that it was a decision has been made, and it's really hard to go back, I think, and try to figure that out, or to compare with today's dollars. And
I think one of the things to keep in mind is that for us to provide a level of service in the corridor, and again, this is if things are built, right? So we understand that the actual construction activity is an impact to level of service, and so I can't speak to that very well, but the main congestion, of course, happens at our intersections, and that's why we've really focused on the first project at 50th, which should alleviate some of the issues there, and then the larger project at 29th for the roundabout and tabletopping that intersection. Those two projects go a long way to helping with the concurrency and the development in the area. And then the roads in between then, of course, fill that in. One of the comments that came up regularly in our listening sessions in the last few weeks was concern over the condition of the corridor while all the development is going on, while we're planning these capital projects. And we've taken that to heart. We're already looking at some things we can do with some of the signal phasing at 15th. That was a suggestion by one of the residents. And then as well as the pavement condition, Sarah Smith and Josh Lipscomb are looking at that to see what we can do, because it's not as simple as we have a project plan, we're not going to maintain the road. We have quite a bit of work that still needs to do to make sure that people can safely drive the corridor while we're doing the projects.
I appreciate that, and I've noticed there's been additional striping at the stop signs and lights because things are changing, and people who've driven those roads habitually need to be alerted that things are changing. And then the thing that's really makes me squirm is thinking of applying all of the traffic that occurs with the event center.
Yes.
That'll be something to really try to keep on top of.
Absolutely. We know that we have a large coordination effort to do with the fairgrounds itself, especially during event times, the fair itself, to make sure that we don't just block access during construction once we get to that point. But also, to your point about the amphitheater, we had a pretty rough start, I think, this season, and some missteps with the event manager and some of the traffic control that wasn't implemented during the first event. And I'm hoping we got some of that taken care of. I know the state troopers were out there. I saw myself before Hank Williams Jr. and Snoop Dogg came in this last weekend, so they weren't together, I was told. So anyway, hopefully we're doing better. And Steve Gallup, our transportation division manager, is meeting regularly during the event season. They have a standing meeting every week with the event manager, and I know they've been responsive. I think they're just still trying to dial it in so that it works.
Right, thanks for that. And I think periodically connecting with the neighborhood association related to the event and the traffic would be great.
And Councilor, if I may, one of the things that we're also implementing is a transportation management plan in which we're taking a look at what are the traffic volumes during the peak times, what are our options as far as constructability of that roundabout. Are we better off, for example, constructing that during the winter time when you have lower volumes and maybe actually closing it so that we can get it done much, much faster and deal with the pain of closing it versus trying to do an extended construction period. So our intent right now is to complete that transportation management plan, work with the Washington State Department of Transportation, make sure that they're on board with it, they support it, and then we'd like to come and present it to you so that you have a chance to see it, as well as presenting it to the businesses in the area, the event center, the fairgrounds, all of those, so that they're aware of it and they feel, comfortable that we're not just, going to ruin their business.
Thanks a lot.
Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So first of all, thank you. You have an incredibly challenging job ahead of you. And, just being in the construction industry, anytime you're dealing with something existing, it makes it very challenging. And so trying to maintain the ability for people to continue to get through that corridor while working is a really big challenge. So hats off to you on figuring that out as we go forward. I did have two real quick questions. One is, and you had already actually mentioned something, but I was curious and appreciate you doing those listening sessions, and you'd mentioned something about the signal. Is there anything else that you took away from those public sessions?
Actually, there's quite a bit, and I will be, during the public hearing next week for the access management plan, I was going to cover quite a bit more of that input.
Great.
And happy to dip a toe further into that now, but...
No need, we'll hear next week, yeah.
Yeah,
thank you. And the other question I had was, with the utility adjustments, is it a situation where they just benefit by the fact that we have stuff open, or do we, do they pay a portion of the costs that we're absorbing by opening? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the way it typically works when we do one of these large roadway improvements, it's usually coinciding with the need for more utilities in the area to support development. So just like our transportation level of service, there may be a need for sanitary sewer in a more rural area where it's been on septic. So they're definitely going to take advantage of us opening up the road and having the subgrade opened up. All of their work is done on a separate schedule on the bid. So that's bid competitively, then they pay whatever that cost is for those items. So they don't commingle with whatever we might have for federal reimbursement or some other costs that we have that's county. Does that answer your?
Yeah, I think so. It's okay. Yeah, I guess it's a good deal for them.
It is, but they are paying the costs for the contractor to do that installation work, and then, we obviously don't want them to come back in too soon and tear up our new roads. So it's a benefit to us in that.
Great, thank you.
Someone mentioned a minute ago what gives them heartburn as an outsider looking at this project. And you commented on the event center, and wow, yes, that's one of the things that really could give me heartburn knowing that if it went south, it would be really, really difficult for the county. But, in addition to that, there is a brain involved here that is so organized, that is overseeing this effort in a way that is absolutely phenomenal for tracking everything. And I think about, what would it be like if we had chaos instead? If I were heading up this project, it would be, I tell you, because there's just so much associated with it. So thank you for keeping everything, it's beyond organized. Thank you for keeping everything exactly on track. It's much appreciated, and I don't know how you do it, but I'm glad you're doing it.
Well, Chair Bowerman, I will accept the acknowledgement, but I'd like to accept that as a group brain, because really it is an effort of so many key subject matter experts that are on our staff, and it's not any one of us that's doing any of this, but boy, we certainly have benefited from some really phenomenal efforts all across the board, and it would take too long to list all the different programs that are involved with this kind of work, but you can see them on our org chart, and I'm happy to speak to just the phenomenal effort that's being done by everybody. And we've got a small army behind us in the chairs here, but I know online we've got another small army that are available for questions, and I know I've been capitalizing that, but I'll turn the mic over if there's something else that I can't answer. So, but thank you for that acknowledgement.
Other comments from council? Maybe you've just bowled us over.
Well, I really do appreciate you keeping this on the agenda. I know it's been a very long day for all of you, but we appreciate it as staff, and I know it's always a little less restful me the night before these, so to not have another night of lack of rest is great too. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, that's a small contribution on our part because getting through an agenda item like this, we understand its importance to you, and it is important to us as well. So with that, we will move on, and thanks again. We
Thank you.
are going to move to counselor reports. Are there any?
Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got one issue that kind of could go either place, council reports or policy issues, but I serve on the RDPO, which is the Regional Disaster Plan. Can't remember the O right now, but at any rate, I received an email, I think yesterday, and it was just brought to my attention this morning, and I'm not quite sure why we're getting it so late, but we received a request to provide like a letter of support for some grant funding that the RDPO is going to be applying for. And I don't know if Mike is still here. He knows a little bit more about it, but he himself also is not fully aware. But the question I want to pose to council is the timing, unfortunately, is that any decision that we would make on a letter of support for this would have to be made today. So I don't know how council would want to handle this. Do we want to, I don't know how to address this because of the timing issue, unfortunately.
We have had awkward and inappropriate timing issues in the past and simply dealt with it when it was an important project. Is this project something that, in your judgment, should go forward with support?
I can't tell you that at this moment in time. Unfortunately, I've not been able to read through it yet. As I just, like I said, I just got it yesterday. But one of the things we could do is if council was comfortable just giving me the decision to make that once I study it, and I would work with Mike Lewis for sure, because he knows a lot more about this than I do.
Kathleen, your comments?
I know Mike probably has a little information, but I don't think he was privy to this discussion as well. And honestly, I think we got this during the meeting this morning, so I honestly have not read it, but if it, let me just take a look here. What are they asking for? Support of a grant, applying for a grant?
Yes.
Okay. It's definitely council's decision if you want to have Councilor Young review and sign, but I'm never opposed to supporting an agency applying for a grant as long as they have the resources to implement it when they receive that grant.
Who is the applicant and how much are they? I mean, there's no
It looks like it's being sent to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. The applicant, my guess is if you go down, Kristen, at the bottom, is the RDPO, so Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. If that's, I can't see the very bottom.
Is that a county organization?
That's an organization that we're a part of. Councilor Young is a representative as one of the boards and commissions. It's mostly Portland agency, and most of it impacts Portland, but we do have a seat at the table right now. Cresta goes to the city of Portland, but it is really driven by the agencies in Portland. And if you'd like, we can message Mike, and if he's still here, we can have him pop up, and we can go on to other reports, and if he shows up.
Is the desire to have this letter of support go in with the application?
They have a deadline of, I believe, the 17th, which is in 5 days.
And could a letter follow the application and still be considered?
I don't know that.
Usually it would have less impact, I would say. I'm just glancing over the verbiage here, but I still can't quite understand what this is for, what we're asking for. Apparently, it's for monies for a grant that is already designated as to its purpose to collaboratively design a sustainable community organization, etc.
So I just checked my phone here, and I do have an email from Mike Lewis. And he said that there are not a lot of details, but they want a grant, move forward with some planning. In general, this is the type of thing we have supported in the past. It is about all of the RDPO partners and not Oregon or single entity specific. Please note the letter contains language committing us to providing staff time on the project, so that is something to consider. That likely would be me attending the meetings and potentially others on occasion. Off the top of my head, an example might be GIS mapping the locations of adult family homes or some info gathering from public health. CRESA will likely take the lead, and I would represent the county. That's essentially I mean, we can put this on pause if we want, and if Mike is able to come in. I don't think he knows a whole lot more than that, though. I'm not sure where the breakdown was in the communication process here. I don't know, and I thank you for Kristen for bringing this to our attention.
So, Madam Chair, I feel very uncomfortable with this because I really don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And but I certainly would support Counselor Young in his own judgment. Once he evaluates everything, he could do a letter of support in his own name, just not on behalf of the entire council. You know, I just don't know enough. It's just too superficial with too short a timeline.
I concur with that, except I have concerns when it comes to commitment of county resources being done by any one counselor. And I think we should draw the line there and say maybe this could be supported at a later date if it is meaningful to them, and if not, we're sorry. That's kind of where I'm coming from on it. The support from the county services could end up to be somewhat significant. You started mentioning GIS, etc. That could all be significant. So I would draw the line there.
I think I would agree with you, Chair.
Since we don't know, right, Sue? If we knew, it would be a different matter. But are there 3 people who do wish to go forward in some fashion at this time? I think not. So for now, let's put it on hold. And if it's appropriate to revisit later, we will.
Just point of clarification, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, so that you know, Councilor Medvedev had mentioned me as an individual counselor, obviously not representing the board. Is it the council's desire that we just completely stay out of it?
That's what I'm
I feel like
suggesting.
you as an, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, so I would just say that you as an individual, I think I wouldn't mind if you as an individual wrote something, a letter of support.
So
I think
drafting your own letter that doesn't.
A letter of support is good as long as it doesn't commit county resources, and that's tough since that's apparently in part what they're asking for.
Yeah, I get that too, and I would like to, further study exactly. I'm not sure exactly how a letter of support would make a commitment, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's hold off for now if that is agreeable with you, and maybe get more information, figure out what they're looking for, and if it's appropriate, we could pick it up again next week.
Okay, understood.
And if they're open to having it after their deadline, because the deadline, we don't meet again until after their deadline.
Right. And you know, they'll learn from this that for them to meet the deadline is important too. It's kind of the way things work. So, thank you though for bringing it up, given the timeliness of it and the difficulty of moving it forward at this time. I'm appreciative for you not just ignoring it. Are there work session requests?
Oh, Chair, I have a report, or it might be a policy issue. I just wanted to chat about fireworks a little bit. I started receiving emails of concern about fireworks on June 30th, and fireworks continue to go off in some neighborhoods through July 7th. I've received 160 emails in total of people complaining about fireworks. And I think I've received a couple just as we've been meeting here today. So I believe that the council has received reports from various entities that track the impacts of fireworks. So I would just suggest that we take a look at that, and I think we need to really take another look at fireworks and what is allowed and what isn't allowed, but be informed by the various service providers and get input from them.
I
So
concur that getting information is necessary. Just as an example, the local newspaper reported $1 million of damage to homes and businesses in Clark County. And that was done, that report was done before it would have been humanly possible to have done an investigation and know the cause of those activities. So, you know, being able to have the time for people like Max Booth and others who work with him to do their investigations and then report, and then we can give out accurate information and make accordingly policy decisions that make some kind of sense. I know I received communications too from 3 people, which I thought was interesting, who were telling me as they wrote me that their houses were burning down. That couldn't have been. It could not have been, because it wasn't reported in the 911 system. It wasn't something that came forward in the fire reports. So it just it tends to get blown up in some cases. And so knowing which those cases are and which are the ones that are real is important to learn in making good policy. So I know I asked the fire marshal for his reports on that as they come forward, and he is going to provide those to us, and I think that will be quite informative for us. And the sheriff as well. He has a different kind of insight, and he will share information with us as well.
So, Madam Chair, I made basically the same request to the fire marshal to, you know, who, what, where, you know, let's see more of a forensic report and detailed report. And I'm expecting that to come as if it was an arson and would support an arson investigation. We need that kind of detail. Vancouver has a fire marshal as well, and they will have a report coming forward. So I appreciate all the emails that we have received, and I would like to see those final reports, those detailed reports on what happened and what didn't happen.
Yes, and I feel confident that we will be getting them. It won't be immediate because these things aren't investigated, can't be investigated in a day or two of time. It takes a bit of time to come up accurately with the information. So we will hear more.
And Madam Chair, I had a very brief council report. I've kind of mentioned it here and there at other times. I did attend a public ceremony, if you will, in Washougal for the announcement of the $40 million BNSF underpass project that the Secretary of Transportation had awarded Washougal. And I did get a chance to talk very briefly with those that were in attendance. We have a lot of crossings with our own rail line, and we have never asked for any grants, and we have need of them. So I don't know where that sits. I know I did very briefly mention it to our staff about, hey, let's get ahead of this. Let's identify those crossings. And there is money available federally to improve these crossings. And no matter what we do with our railroad, it's still there. And we should take care of these. It's all for safety. And certainly Washougal had particular circumstances that rated that project very highly. I mean, they had like 40 trains of a mile long every day go through there and bisect Washougal. I've sat behind those trains, so I know how miserable it is just to wait while a train goes by at 5 miles an hour and it's a mile long. In any case, I'm hoping we can have more discussions about that. I'm looking forward to seeing some detail on where those crossings are and whether or not we have the capacity to submit grant requests.
Is there anything, Counselor, that we should formalize in that regard?
Well, I think these are points of discussion anytime we discuss the rail dependent work that we're doing. Hopefully we'll be doing in earnest soon.
It will be coming up soon, won't it? Yes. Okay, very good. How about other counselor reports? Work session requests.
There's none today.
Policy issues.
Just one that I have, or maybe two, I know Councilor Mavagidis mentioned about the freight rail dependent use, and after the last work session, Council did provide direction, and that work session was in May, the end of May, to have legal review the law, and will identify potential legal issues resulting in possible amendments that may be helpful in providing clarity. Community planning is reviewing and updating the options that were presented on slide 7, which was particularly option 4, which was looking at the development regulations. Oliver did let me know that they're solidifying that now, so it may be back as early as next week or the following week. And then they're also looking at how schools obtain sewer as well. The legal review, I believe that Chris is on vacation, so that may not be ready, but we can certainly bring forward the development regulations that Oliver's group is looking at.
Very good. And
just
is there another policy issue?
It's kind of policy, kind of procedural. Board commissions that council interviews, selects, we're going to start putting those on the council time agenda, probably under new business, and going through some of the logistics of, we'll get the applications to you, we can number them so you can talk about numbers, and then so the council can make the decision in a public meeting on who they want to interview, if they want to interview or just appoint, so that we can make sure that that process is clear and meeting all of our rules that we need to do in public meetings. So you'll see that on as soon as next week, potentially on a council time agenda. Is there any questions on
We're
that?
talking here about all commissions and boards where the council makes an appointment,
Yes,
that all
I-
applicants are going to be noticed online?
But there's some things I need to work through to see how, because we do redact personal information, so that will not be shared online. So that's procedural things I need to work through with legal first, but the decision-making process on who is going to be interviewed needs to happen in a public meeting. So we will come forward with a process, hopefully that works for council and meets our regulations on that.
So if I may, Madam Chair, because Kathleen, thanks for that. And there is one right now that's, as far as I know, completely in limbo. And that's the historical vacancies where the city has some vacancies and their own process. And then we have one vacancy and I think 5 candidates. Normally the process is we each kind of email Michelle and say, here's who we want to interview, or we just accept who they're recommending, or we want to re-advertise. But my understanding is there's 5 candidates. Not all of them may be popular with all counselors, but we're kind of in this position of limbo right now that we don't have three votes of
Yeah.
direction.
So this discussion will probably be on next week's agenda, so we can work through that process and get a solid path forward from council. But yes, Councilor, you are correct. You are correct, Councilor Mebajii, that there is 1 county vacancy with 5 applicants. I will talk to our communication staff because I'm not sure why in the press release we included the city, because the city has nothing to do with the county appointments.
And the other point of clarification is, are those 5 applicants all applicants for the 1 county position, or are some applicants for the city position?
They're not. They're all for our position. The city has its own nominees and for its vacancies. The 5 are for our position. At least that's what we were told.
I hadn't heard that. So that's very interesting. That's a lot of applicants for 1 position.
So in the past, we could say, hey, we want to interview these 3 candidates. And we
Right.
could proceed with the 5 that we have by narrowing it down to 3. And I'm just giving that as an example.
Well,
And
it's a real life example, as I understand it. I would hope that that would be the kind of thing that we could still take 3 out of the 5 and interview, if we so chose.
Yeah, so Michelle is just waiting for that guidance. She's waiting for that email.
Well, I was not clear that the 5 applicants were for our 1 position. That was where my understanding had a gap.
We will provide clarity on the process and bring it to council next week, and we'll have this one as the point of discussion, so that we ensure, because I know it's well, when I just learned that our press release included the city verbiage, that causes confusion in my mind. So it should be that we should be only putting it out there. But I have been told they only applied for the county position, but we will verify that and bring the information back to council.
Okay, very good. And when we see their applications, it should become quite clear. So, are there other policy issues?
I'll just ask Amber if she has any update on the next steps for the fencing ordinance as well as public defense office.
Yes, I can provide a quick update on that. Our ordinance is going to legal this week after some more CCSO feedback, and so that will go into legal for review. The fencing costing is going to the finance team to provide an in-depth analysis, as we talked about last week. We talked about fencing and what that looks like for costing, so the finance team will review that. That's going into their office this week from Michelle and I. And then the public defense office costing, as we talked about during the work session, is going through the finance team to look at the contract piece is what will be left over, and then after the Baker Tilly conversation next week, what the positions would look like for budget impact. So that will be going to the finance team as well. So a lot of moving parts in the next couple weeks in those 3 areas.
And it sounds like they could come to closure before long as well.
Yes. I think we have good movement on all of those to be able to get to the next step.
Anything else on policy? I understand
else.
that I'm sorry.
No other policy updates today.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that our executive session was canceled, and therefore this meeting is adjourned. Bye-bye.